Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Do want to switch gears. Was a little bit of college hoops news from the week that we did not get to on the last show that I at least just want to discuss a tiny bit. It comes from the lovely world of college basketball, where for the second year in a row, we have ourselves the ACC SEC Challenge. Okay, and for people who forgot, we used to have the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Then ESPN, which this is an ESPN event, they stopped broadcasting the Big Ten. So they're like, we're not promoting Purdue and Iowa and Indiana. And so they turned it into the ACC SEC Challenge a year ago. Thought year one went pretty well. We got some good games. We got Duke at Arkansas, a game that I was at. Woo Pig Suey. I saw him call the Hogs, baby. Woo. I saw him call the Hogs. It was actually really fun to see the Hog call in person. But there was that one. There was obviously North Carolina hosting Tennessee. Wild game there. Kentucky against Miami. Miami was, of course, coming off a Final Four. So the tone was really set. Thought overall it was a pretty fun event. Well, we're in year two. And earlier in the week, John Rothstein was the first one with the actual games. We got the schedule. And let me just say this. PU, this schedule stinks. ESPN, what are you doing? What are you doing, ESPN? This schedule is brutal, and I want to go ahead and dive in, and I want to go ahead and talk, but most importantly, I want to do the work of ESPN, because it took me about 3 minutes to come up with 3 very high-profile games that I think would have everyone interested in college hoops in December at a time when college hoops is struggling for eyeballs, but really struggling to set the narrative for the sport itself. And so, let's talk a little bit about this. And before we do, let me give a couple quick caveats. Listen, this is not a perfect system. It's not easy. And there's a couple reasons some of the games worked out the way they did. By the way, I should reference some of the big ones. So one, obviously, John Calipari, first year at Arkansas. Oh my goodness, Coach Cal, whether you like him, whether you hate him, he himself is a huge brand. So we're going to put him in a big game, right? We're going to send him somewhere marquee, right? They're going to play at Miami. Miami's going to be terrible next year, okay? And while it's great for Coach Cal, he's going to get a nice little suntan. Is that the best you can do? By the way, Kentucky, Mark Pope, year one. Remember, these games are in early December. The season starts in November. So we'll see Mark Pope in Kentucky in the Champions Classic against Duke. But there are a lot of different intriguing games that you can play even if Duke is already on the schedule. Kentucky ended up at Clemson. What? Do not say. You know what? You know how they say sign me up for that? Whatever the opposite of sign me up for that is the opposite. Get me a subscription to the Tennis Channel. Get me a subscription to Hulu. I won't be, well, I will be watching it, but I'm not going to enjoy it. We had that one. Now, I will say there were a couple other intriguing ones that are legitimately good. Bama is going to UNC. And also, again, we mentioned earlier, producer Matt's Auburn Tigers are going to Duke. So I get it if you're an Auburn fan. I get it if you're an Alabama fan. I get it if you're a North Carolina fan. And I get, by the way, that it's not perfect, that you can't put together the perfect schedule. Again, there are already scheduled games. Duke is already playing Kentucky, so that's off the table. And also, like, let's just be honest. The ACC right now does not have a ton of super marketable marquee teams and games. And so I get that in a perfect world, you hope Syracuse is better. You hope Louisville is better. You hope Wake Forest is better. I get that they're not going to have 7 teams ranked in the top 25. But again, these games could have been better. And let me just kind of talk through what I would do if I was in charge. Because again, I put together a better schedule in 10 minutes than ESPN did. First of all, let's start with Arkansas really quick. So listen, Coach Cal's there. We know it. And as I said a minute ago, whether you're a Kentucky fan that thinks Cal is overrated, should never coach again, whatever, or you're an Arkansas fan that's like super fired up because you should have a very good team coming into 2024, 2025. No matter where you are on the Cal spectrum, we all kind of acknowledge that he himself is a pretty darn big brand, right? Now you can argue, is he the biggest name in college basketball? Has Dan Hurley surpassed him? Whatever. But he himself is a huge brand. And so the idea that we're sending him to Miami, that's no bueno, unacceptable. And immediately, as soon as I saw this, I thought of two matchups that would have been awesome for Arkansas. The first one, bluntly, is a rematch of last year's SEC ACC challenge, okay? That was, of course, as I said, Duke was at Arkansas. Arkansas wins. They storm the floor. It was to date the only court storming that I have ever seen or been a part of. Fun fact, that was also the first time we tried to live stream. It didn't go well, mostly because my internet sucked, but doesn't really change the fact that it was a great atmosphere. So you could replay that game, not just because it's a replay, but because I was thinking about this. The Cal brand is huge. The Duke brand is huge. By the way, the Arkansas brand is huge as well. By the way, it is a rematch of the 1994 National Championship game, so you get a little bit of nostalgia. But I think, what I was thinking about is what I said a minute ago, is the fact that, remember, it's December. Most people aren't paying that close attention to college basketball at that time, and I'll take it even a step further from there. On top of that, Arkansas, because of the nature in which Coach Cal schedules, it's very likely, if not probable, that this is like the first big game on Arkansas's schedule. Coach Cal doesn't do the Maui Invitational, Battle for Atlantis. He doesn't do these multi-team events. And so what better way to introduce the world to Cal at Arkansas than by shoving them right into the middle of Cameron Indoor Arena and having them figure it out? And the thing that I think works out really well in that case is that in the moment of football season, you kind of have a baked in basketball conversation to have out of that game. Like there is a conversation for Stephen A. Smith, who knows nothing about basketball, to have on the day following that game for whoever, Mike Greenberg, whatever. And the conversation is pretty straightforward. If Arkansas loses, which they probably wouldn't be favored because the game's at Duke, well, then it becomes, Coach Cal still can't win the big one. What a bum. He's so bad. They're awful, blah, 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 whatever. And I'm not saying it's fair. I'm just saying that would be the conversation that you have. But then two, what if Arkansas won? Then you could have oh my God, Coach Cal, he just went to Cameron Indoor. Is Coach Cal back? Did Coach Cal ever leave? Was it really just time for him to go? Maybe he has more left in the tank than we thought. So to me, you just missed a golden opportunity right there. And I think even if that doesn't work out, and we'll get to some other potential matchups as well, there's another great matchup that you could have placed that would have had very intriguing stakes. How about sending Arkansas to Louisville? One, Louisville, of course, has its own new head coach, Pat Kelsey. We've talked about him. I'm really excited about that Pat Kelsey era. But two, what's at stake there? Coach Cal returning to a building where he might be more hated than even in Rupp Arena. Like, I think he'll get a lot of cheers in Rupp Arena. He'll get some boos too. You send Coach Cal to the Yum Center that first week, then again, it's Coach Cal returns to Louisville, the home of his previous biggest rival. He just won there this past year. What about that? Oh, by the way, you know who Coach Cal's lead assistant is? Kenny Payne, the former Louisville head coach. So to me, those were two just slam dunk no-brainers. What are we doing sending Arkansas to Miami? From there, I'll say, look, the North Carolina-Alabama game is certainly interesting. Now, I think Alabama, it's hard for me to argue that of those two big brands, whether it's Duke, whether it's Carolina, that they shouldn't be playing one of the two. And the reason why is pretty straightforward. It's because if you think about it, if you look at it, Alabama is probably going to be a preseason top 5 team. I'm going to have them at number 1. I think most people voting are going to have them probably in the top 3. And so it's hard for me to complain about UNC, especially because, by the way, Alabama and UNC are low-key, kind of in the middle of like this weird new age rivalry out of nowhere. Remember, Alabama beat North Carolina a few years ago when North Carolina was ranked number 1 in the country. Remember, Alabama last offseason beat North Carolina head-to-head for a Chapel Hill native named Jaron Stevenson. Remember, Alabama beat North Carolina in the Sweet 16 this past year. Remember, Alabama also beat North Carolina for Cliff Omoyori in the transfer portal. So there's this weird thing going on. And if they keep that one, that's cool. I also think, by the way, sending Nate Oates to Bama, to Duke would be pretty funny too, because if you remember, Nate Oates was kind of critical of Coach K a few years ago during the COVID situation. If you remember, he said Coach K was trying to get the season canceled, and Nate Oates was like, well, if he had a good team, would he be trying to get the season canceled? So I think that'd be fun as well. And I could see either one going that way. But the other one to me that just makes no sense is Kentucky-Clemson. I mean, Kentucky-Clemson, that does about as much for me as trying to think of an analogy off the top of my head. It's like going to a steakhouse and ordering a salad with no dressing. Like, what are we doing? And here's the thing. Even if you can't get them with Duke because they play Duke earlier in the year, there's plenty of great games that you could set up. You could set up Carolina. You could set up some other ones as well. And literally any game would be more interesting than Clemson, okay? Notre Dame is a historic rival. Play Notre Dame. That'd be fun. I think seeing Kentucky go to Syracuse, play in that dome would be awesome. Now, Syracuse is technically a road opponent this year. They're both playing on the road, and every team gets a home and home every year. But remember, this is a made-for-TV event. You can flip-flop and then just give the other team back-to-back home games. Like, it doesn't have to be a thing where just because they played at home last year, they're going to have to be on the road this year. It's made for TV. Make it up. Who cares? By the way, Carolina played at home in this event last year. They're playing at home again this year. So it can be done. There's Kentucky against Georgia Tech. Send them to Atlanta. Kentucky has a ton of fans in Atlanta. They call it Catlanta. I think Wake Forest is going to be kind of interesting this year. Have them play Wake Forest. Sort of a historic team. Heck, how about NC State? NC State at least is coming off of a Final Four. So like this Clemson game, it's just like, what are we even doing? And so I was thinking about it. These would, if I could put together dream matchups, dream scenarios, whatever, this is what I would do. I would start with this. I would start with Kentucky at Carolina. I know they played last year in the CBS Sports Classic, but Kentucky's off the table with Duke for the year. And again, it goes back. First of all, Kentucky's on the road. North Carolina's at home. 2, this is a made-for-TV event where we're trying to get people interested in college hoops. So Kentucky plays Duke in the opening week of the season. They play Gonzaga a few days after this one. You're putting them on TV. You're introducing the world to Mark Pope, and you're giving people something to talk about. Is this Pope guy really good? Is he really bad? Does he know what he's doing? Whatever. From there, I would send Bama to Duke because I do think that Nate Oates is going to have a top 5 team. Duke is a huge brand in its own right. And I think you're building up the Alabama basketball brand as well with Nate Oates. They're coming off a Final Four. Get that guy back on TV in a high-profile game. Obviously, it kind of worked out because they're playing Carolina. And then the third one, I'd send Arkansas to Louisville. I would send Arkansas to Louisville because, in my opinion, Coach Cal returning to the Yum Center, returning to Louisville, returning to the state of Kentucky, that to me is a story. It's not the biggest story in sports. It'll be during football season, but it's not nothing either. Cal versus Miami, Arkansas versus Miami, it feels like a ESPNU 6:00 local time start. Like it just does. And I just think ESPN missed a ton of opportunity here with these games. By the way, a couple other games that I thought of, Florida and Miami, they open in football. Why are they not playing in basketball? We got Florida and Virginia. We got Miami. We got Florida, Virginia, and Miami and Arkansas. I think Miami versus Florida would be good. It's kind of interesting. Like I said, they play in football, whatever. You get Mario Cristobal on the sidelines talking about why he doesn't know how to take a knee with the game on the line. You get the new Florida football coach because they're probably going to have a new football coach by then. There's plenty to talk about there. I would send Virginia to Tennessee. Listen, Virginia's not very fun to watch, but at least they're kind of a brand, if you will. By the way, I think NC State, Tennessee would be fun. They might be on the schedule already. The only point I'm trying to make is pretty straightforward, is that I do think that this event was kind of butchered. By the way, producer Matt's Auburn Tigers, you can find a spot for them. There's enough interesting teams in the ACC. By the way, how about this? Everyone's going to hate me for saying it. Auburn fans will. How about Auburn at Boston College? Bruce Pearl's from Boston. He used to be the Boston College Eagles mascot. Send him up there, relive it, find video of it, whatever. I got to do everything for everybody. By the way, remember this too. How about this? SMU, Cal, and Stanford are now in the ACC. Because of the overlap, there's only 16 SEC schools, 18 ACC schools. SMU is not part of this event. Have SMU play Texas. Have SMU play Texas A&M. Have SMU play Oklahoma. I got to do everything for everybody. I got enough jobs as it is. I got to do everything. I got to be an ESPN schedule maker right now. What are we even doing?